What if presenting brain injury, reversing trauma, or even solving sleep apnea didn't come from high-tech machines, but from nature itself? Welcome to Industry Ignited, the podcast where we spotlight leaders pushing industries forward with bold ideas and breakthrough innovations. I'm your host, Dr. Leeanne Aguilar, and today I'm joined by Dr. David Smith. He's a clinician, innovator, author, and founder of DeltaChase and TBI Innovations, holding over 40 patents, including the groundbreaking Q-Collar and Sage rebreather. With a career spanning more than 30 years, Dr. Dave has dedicated his work to solving real-life scientific problems, from traumatic brain injury to sudden infant death syndrome, through the power of biomimicry and clever science. Dr. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and greetings, Leanne. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited about this conversation today. You've got some amazing technology, and excited to dive right in. All right. So Dr. Dave, you began your career, though, in math, physics, and chemistry before switching to medicine. What inspired that shift, and how did it shape your career as an innovator?
Well, strangely enough and sheepishly, I was an All-American swimmer and a lifeguard. And at a local large YMCA, I was a supervisor and ended up having a double drowning happening in front of me. After saving that double drowning, let me tell you, it does so much for your ego when all the beautiful young moms come up and want to hug and thank you. And bam, right there. I knew I had to go into medicine. I knew that saving lives was far more exciting to me than sitting at a bench or sitting and doing math problems. So I quickly switched to a chemistry major that included pre-med, and then went on from there to medical school at University of Cincinnati. And then I went into internal medicine, which if your listeners aren't aware, internal medicine is sort of the detectives of the medical world. We go back to 3 years of training. In my case, it was Case Western Reserve University hospitals up in Cleveland, and they train us how to formally solve problems, difficult problems usually. In fact, if you've watched the TV show House, on his door it says internal medicine. So it's not just a primary care doc, we're a little bit more heavily trained.
So you're taught to be the investigator, basically, of medicine.
We don't like the unknown.
No, right? Yeah,
big, and they call us fleas in the medical world because the surgeons are always pesking us away. We're always trying to find a way to not have to go to surgery or to improve the surgery or you name it. So
right, yeah. You often describe yourself as an evidence-based problem solver. Where did that drive to find clever solutions come from?
Well, the evidence-based part's probably on my math background. In chemistry and physics, it's just all math. And the beauty of math is you actually can get an answer, right? And it literally, because all the units cancel out, you're right at the end of the day. So many times when people come to me with problems as doctors, we don't know that there's even an answer. So that's always a frustrating part of my life, deciding whether or not I can even help this individual. Well, if nature's already found an answer and mankind hasn't looked to nature yet, boy, does that give me confidence that spending time and digging in every possible direction might actually find an answer. I call it immersion. I may literally read for 2 weeks before trying to dive into a problem. And that's in every possible direction, anything related to the topic that I'm involved in. And it's just amazing what that ends up leading to frequently.
Wow. Right. Yeah. You've mentioned that many of your innovations track back to that pivotal moment studying nature's resilience, like woodpeckers, giraffes, bats. Can you share the story of how biometrics first captured your imagination?
Well, probably, I came out of my residency training and ended up acquiring the assets of the wound care division of Pfizer. So this was the development company that developed the wound care, not Pfizer itself. But then I ended up getting the opportunity to put other people's peanut butter into our chocolate because we had a very high-tech and very intriguing way of solving and healing wounds. So in doing that, I started to kind of get a a name for myself out in the industry of doing unique and incredible things like putting Manuka honey in our wound dressings, which is theorized to have unbelievable beneficial powers. We ended up pumping oxygen under wound dressings. We imparted them with silver and nanomolecule, you name it. And then I'll be darned if I ended up not getting involved with GlaxoSmithKline as they were having a problem with their intellectual property. Their Breathe Right nasal strip was going off patent. So I ended up being a consultant to them, came up with a brand new Breathe Right advanced version for them, increasing airflow through the nose from 27 up to 70%.
Wow.
That's with less adhesive capabilities. That was a lot of fun for me. And then next thing I know, Materials Modification Inc. came knocking on my door. They had an idea of how to maybe stop bleeding on the battlefield, and they wondered if I would get involved with them. Ultimately, they did ask me to present our findings and what we ended up creating to the Army Research Lab, and boy, is that a trip. You know, you go in, it's an actual military base. Everybody's got a sidearm and carrying M16s. It was different. And then after I'm done talking to the audience, the project coordinator comes up, kind of puts his arm around me, another strange moment for me, and says, "Damn, that was really clever, Doc. How can we talk clever people like you into looking into traumatic brain injury? Not that we want you to stop this beautiful work on stopping our soldiers from bleeding out. That's just as important. But we've got billions and billions of dollars in 60, 70 years. We haven't seemed to move the needle.
Wow.
Why is that, right?"
Yeah.
So I ultimately had some thoughts on the car drive. It's actually a black SUV. You can't make this stuff up. Driving us to lunch off from a military base. And I looked at him and I said, "Well, sir, I have an idea." And he looked at me odd and he says, "About what?" I said, "Well, you told me to solve all of traumatic brain injury. Chop, chop. It's been 20 minutes. Let's get going." And so he says, "Oh, let's let the young doctor," I was young back then, "have a moment." And I said, "Well, let me see if I can explain to you if you're in if I'm in a Volkswagen Beetle Bug and I'm racing you and you're in an M1A1 tank and we both careen into that embankment over there at 70 miles an hour, which one of us dies?" And he said, "Well, you die, you idiot. You're in a tin can and I've got depleted uranium around me." And I said, "Respectfully, we both die." He said, "Our brains continue to move. The brains is a sloshable condition in there. And I crush my brain into the backside of my face, and you do the same thing. Doesn't matter what the dashboard is that landed into it." And I said, "And it's for that reason, and the fact that all you guys do here is try to find a better helmet. Maybe you need to look in a different direction." And about 8 months later, I evolved a whole theory of slosh theory, which brings back many old ways of looking at traumatic brain injury. And at the end of the day, I used that slosh theory to come up with the Q-Collar, which is the first and only medical device that the FDA has ever authorized to be able to claim that we block traumatic brain injury. And so that was sort of the start of everything. And much of what I found out had to do with head ramming sheep and giraffe, because these creatures have figured out a way to raise the volume of blood and just literally, like bubble wrap or an airbag, expand, and they no longer allow the brain movement within the confines of the skull. Wow, that was huge. I ended up talking to Dr. Julian Bales. He's very famous. He was in the movie, or represented in the movie, Concussion. So Alec Baldwin played Julian Bales in that movie. I think Bennett Omalu was played by Will Smith. So it was a pretty good blockbuster side. It wasn't as commercially successful because it came out right when Independence Day came out. But at the end of the day, Julian Bales bought into my theories. They ended up working with us. We did a big study called a Marmoro process. And he looked at me and said, "Dave, I'm having a hard time with this, but I trust your math and your science seems to be okay." He said, "I'll tell you what, if you do more than a 2% reduction in traumatic brain injury markers here at our institution at West Virginia University, we'll join you. We'll give you seed money. We'll do your patent work, but more importantly, I am going to introduce you to everybody." Well, that study showed an 83% reduction in brain injury, and oh my God, I thought
That's amazing.
I thought he was going to fall off his chair. Called
Yeah.
2 o'clock in the morning, sounded like a little school child screaming, "You are not going to believe the results." Well, yeah, I did believe him. I fully expected that result because it's math. It's logical, and it had to happen. So we have our airbags and seatbelts, pre-tensioners go off in our cars for the exact same reason. And look at this, nature did it first. And
Right.
you just needed to go look to nature to find out an answer.
Right. I mean, because that's true. I mean, the rams, the headbutting, I mean, they're going full force against each other and they walk away,
Yeah,
unscathed. I mean, that's an intentional, instinctive,
sure.
um, you know, drive they have. And yeah, so what is it that we were missing, right?
And interestingly, the one that was passed to me at the Army Research Lab was one of the guys in the audience says, "Hey, I think if we could just figure out how a woodpecker can smack its head into a tree 80 million times,
Mm-hmm.
fly
Mm-hmm.
away unharmed, wouldn't we have this whole thing answered?" And guess what? The woodpecker has this strange tongue apparatus that attaches to the top of the beak, goes up over the top of the skull, and apparently attaches to the jugular vein. And when the head moves forward, like the reins of a horse, it occludes the jugulars, and that diverts the blood flow into the brain and helps to create that cushion. We think we know that's what's going on, even though we don't actually operate on this endangered species, because
Right.
mankind has the same structure. In fact, if you have a spinal column, everyone has an omohyoid muscle. And prior to our work, nobody knew what the omohyoid muscles were doing. That every time you yawn, you occlude your jugulars in 4 places. So now we know why everyone yawns. And so that yawning increases your attentional network. The yawning raises the volume of blood in the cranial space. And if we could have just had everybody yawn before that 300-pound linebacker hit them, then they would have been protected. But since you can't just yawn anytime on demand, the
Yeah.
collar does that for you. So if you fear putting this on, for God's sakes, don't ever yawn, because it's the exact same physiology of a yawn, but we impart it continuously and found that we've had no negative consequences whatsoever in bringing that technology or that biomimicry to mankind.
Right. Okay. And this is all inspired just from a conversation, basically. You were there for something else, and you just brought up this unmet need, the TBI, I mean, and it is an epidemic. It is something not only in the military, but sports, and, accidents, traumatic brain injury. It is an unmet need that, we've been, I mean, personally affected by. So I definitely understand that. So you developed the Q-Collar, which is the first FDA-cleared device to help protect against traumatic brain injury. How does it work differently than traditional helmets? So you mentioned a little bit, you put it around your neck, and can you describe like how it works?
Sure. If I may, I'll just go ahead and put one on here. But this obviously is an adjunct or an addition to any kind of a helmet. Helmets do exactly what they're created to do. They prevent you from fracturing your skull. They prevent fingers from coming in and poking your eyeball out, or maybe scratching or bruising the outside. But a helmet cannot stop the movement of the brain within the skull. It just can't. So that's what this Q-Collar does. And it does so very simply. If you look on the back of your hand, you'll see veins. And if you reach down and touch one of those veins, you'll divert the blood flow to the other structures of the hand. Now, that's 30 millimeters of mercury that actually is taken for you to distend or compress that vein. Well, the jugulars, the body of fluid, is mostly underneath the jugulars. So this requires just 3 millimeters of mercury. It's a tiny amount of pressure in comparison, and that particular amount of pressure enables us to be able to be on and active, and you're then able to weather through impacts. We've been studied with IED explosive levels of C4 detonator cord. Our Hamilton County SWAT officers, they practice on blowing up buildings and walls for what's called breacher capabilities. And we ended up putting Q-collars on half of them, and the other half did not get Q-collars. We did a tensor MRI, a very specialized MRI study in the morning, another one at the end of the day. And lo and behold, the ones that had their cranial space fully filled when those impacts were going on, they had almost no findings of damage whatsoever or change in their brain. Whereas those that weren't wearing it, these little damage spots were everywhere.
Wow.
So this is really taken on with the military. We're about 55,000 people are using Q-Collars right now. I'm very proud of the fact that down in Fort Benning, Georgia, they have the best Rangers competition, and there's 150 of the best of the best of the best. So the Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, Green Beret, and they all compete. And all 150 of them last year are wearing Q-Collars of all of our special forces.
Yeah.
So there's something there. These folks, they don't get issued Q-Collars. They get issued money. They go buy their own weapons. They go up, they buy their own helmets. They buy their own materials. They have chosen to wear that Q-Collar because they'll go out on the range and fire. Oh, another one that's amazing is the Secret Service. All of their pistol instructors, they're all wearing Q-Collars because at the end of the day, they no longer have ringing in their ears. You know, they can't make a claim of this. We haven't submitted any data to the FDA, but we knew that was going to happen because we volumized the inner ear as well. And we predicted, and our animal studies demonstrated up to a 90% prevention of of hearing damage, even with an IED blast.
Wow.
I know. It's crazy stuff. But nature came up with it. I mean, I love to brag. Oh, Dave, but
Yeah.
nature did it. All I did was recognize what she's doing and then mimic her.
Right, right. So, and it was just all inspiration from looking at the right animals in nature and just realizing, okay, this has already, been solved over here. Let's just see how we can mimic it in the human with this device. Wow.
It's very simple and it seems low tech, but
Yeah.
memory metal inside of here, so that no matter how many times you open and close it, it always comes back and compresses the exact amount. It has a way of, by gravity, seating itself exactly where it needs to. I mean, it's all idiot proof. And that's the beauty of it. It is low tech. It's really hard to not. The only way you can harm yourself is by purchasing one that's too big.
Okay.
Then you have a decorative necklace. Okay.
So they come in different sizes?
So there are sizes basically an 11-inch circumference up to 18 inches, and there's a web page there on buying the site. And I have nothing to do with the selling and buying of this product. I've licensed it off to people that are far better than I am on that aspect. But after fitting yourself, you want to buy that size. You don't want to buy one too big because then it's a decorative necklace. You can buy one or even two sizes too small, and it still will function as planned. So it's designed to have that little bit of wiggle room as well.
Right. You also invented another device. It's called the Sage Rebreather, sometimes described as CPR for the brain. How does this device leverage CO2 to protect or even reverse damage after brain trauma?
Well, it turns out a lot of people think that carbon dioxide is some kind of a toxin or a poison. It is not at all. It's in every cell of your body. Your body uses it as a hormone to signal itself in different areas. In fact, the definition of a hormone is being created in one place and having its function in another place. So it turns out that many of the animals out there in the forest have figured out ways to modulate the CO2 level in their bodies upward. So remember, way back in the Jurassic and the Precambrian period, carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere were 7,000 parts per million. We're way down at 400 parts per million now. So, plants can't even eat at 260 parts per million, and the whole body of Earth is getting down to that level. Well, animals aren't idiots, especially if they have 20 million years to evolve. And so if you look at, for example, giraffe, which is what we fashioned this after, the giraffe exhales, and all of that carbon dioxide in the exhale goes up 2 stories and out the chimney. But when it re-inhales, all that CO2 is rebreathed into the next breath. That's called dead space rebreathing. And in fact, guess what? You have the same mechanism. You have all these sets of sinuses that really mankind didn't know for sure what those were for. Now we know that there's 4% CO2 in these sinuses. There are 4% CO2 in every bird's air sacs. So all birds, when they go across your field of view, you shouldn't look the same at them anymore. 9 sacs that we weren't really sure what those were for. Inside them is 4% CO2. That's called dead space rebreathing. They can raise their CO2 levels Woodpeckers are cavity nesting birds. On top of that, the cavities inside which they put their baby birds in, those cavities have CO2 levels as high as 4 to 5%. Well, that's 150 times normal. Well, what's that mama bird thinking? Putting her baby birds in that milieu of lower oxygen and higher CO2, because those birds have to eat by pecking into trees, and they slam 80 million times at 12 times the force that you and I get brain injured. What in the world?
Right. Wow.
Head ramming sheep, one more example for you. These head ramming sheep are fascinating because they have what are called horn cores. And if I took this horn off, you'll notice it's completely hollow. Well, it's filled with carbon dioxide. And when you have horn cores, I could put my mouth around this living animal, if it was like, and blow and inhale and exhale directly into their lungs. That's what's called pneumatized. So all of these are pneumatized. Your partial pressure of CO2 is 35 millimeters of mercury. A head ramming sheep is 47, and the giraffe is 57, the most efficient of all. That's what we chose to do. So on our device, we have channeled breathing. So we have all these channels created, and at the end, there are openings. This is completely fail-safe. Again, we're trying to go low-tech, but brilliantly conceived of by nature, because it's this columned breathing that allows the fail-safe mechanism to occur. As you breathe faster, you get more turbulence, then you get more air from the outside because of all the different openings that are there. At the end of the day, this simple little device, breathing into it, enables a rise of your 35 millimeters of mercury right up to 42, sometimes 43. Not quite the level of a head ramming sheep, but oh, the benefits are unbelievable.
Yeah, I can imagine. Beyond the battlefield, where do you see these technologies making the biggest impact, like in sports, healthcare, or emergency response?
What goes on my epitaph or on my tombstone is CPR for the brain. I'm really excited to tell you that this actually obliterates sleep apnea, altitude illness. I was this all-American swimmer, but if I go to 4,000 feet, I can't even walk up there, right? 2 minutes of breathing on this device, all of my symptoms are gone completely.
Wow.
So the military is interested in it for that reason alone, because it opens up different battlefield potentials, right? So sleep apnea, altitude illness are big, but still traumatic brain injury typically occurs in a younger population that doesn't die of their affliction. And it's for that reason, and I'm quoting Dr. Daniel Spate, one of the largest authors in traumatic brain injury, when he said that TBI, for that reason, causes more human suffering and cost than all cancer, all heart disease, and all strokes. So mankind has not been able to make a dent in TBI. And at least our animal studies are showing an 83% reduction. And you just wouldn't believe the hundreds of professional athletes and collegiate athletes coming back going, I just cannot believe the difference when I'm up there getting either repetitive head impacts or major blows. They're doing so much better. You can't stop all brain injury, can't stop all concussions, but man, are they happy.
Wow. Yeah. So this work on just the CO2 regulation, it's just pointed to all these breakthroughs, like you mentioned, sleep apnea, altitude sickness, and even SIDS.
We did go down the SIDS pathway. SIDS is a frustrating condition because number one, you're studying very young children, which is very hard clinically to do. They can't offer you complaints. They can't tell you what's wrong. And then on top of that, it's mom and dad that are looking over their shoulder. It's not the person giving the okay. Plus, SIDS kills about 1,000 people throughout the United States, and it's just not a very large population when you're trying to create a market size to go after something. We did create some prototypes. We do feel that technology has real merit. We're probably going to have to joint venture with another company that has the bandwidth to move forward, because right at that same time that we were realizing that this could have implications in SIDS, we started to realize the numbers of people with traumatic brain injury and the dramatic response to it. And I just had to shelf the SIDS technology for the time being.
Right, to focus on the larger population that's being impacted.
Right.
Uh,
Come back
but
to it, though.
yeah, right. Well, and then there's sleep apnea, which alone affects nearly 1 billion people worldwide. How
Correct.
close are we to seeing see the CO2 modulating devices used at scale for civilian healthcare?
So we've had our first two conversations with the FDA. So we are there at their doorstep, but that was just an introductory conversation. We just kind of wanted to get a feel of the pulse of the reviewers at the FDA. We have very strong designs. We feel like this is so safe that it should be over the counter without the need for a prescription. The Q-Collar is so safe, it's over the counter without a prescription. The FDA wasn't really warm and fuzzy about that idea. We also felt that we should be able to use home sleep study capabilities and not have to go into the hospital sleep labs. They're not convenient for patients. They're wildly more expensive, and they don't get to sleep in their home environment. So the two things that we were hoping that the FDA was just going to go, well, sure, Dave, we can do it. They're like, absolutely not. So that changed our course. And we thought that we could quite literally potentially get to market in 8 months to 12 months. And with the FDA putting up a few, we'll call them roadblocks or speed bumps, probably a better word, 18 to 24 months, probably somewhere in that range. And of course, the cost goes way up now because now we're going to have to do all of our studies in a manner that they feel is more conducive to science.
Ah, okay. And you mentioned the lymphatic flow and the brain's ability to clear waste. How might your work intersect with future treatments for dementia or long-term brain health?
So there is a physiology that was just recognized out of Boston called the glymphatic system. So most of your listeners might know that we have lymph vessels all over our body. You can feel lymph nodes underneath here, lymph node under here, but there are no lymph up above the jaw in the cranial space. So how does the brain take out its trash, right? How does it deal with infections and metabolites and things of that nature? Well, they found a fascinating physiology where basically cerebral spinal fluid starts to evolve and push itself down into the spinal cord and then out into the body for cleansing by those other capabilities. And they found that when you lie down at night, there's a movement of that space of that of the cerebral spinal fluid away from the brain and down that cord. And they talk about, an 8-hour period, this fluid moving as much as 5-10 millimeters of movement just by lying down. So the thought was, well, maybe now we know why we sleep, because we're potentiating the glymphatic system and we're taking out the trash. Well, we have a technology. It's just in a theory stage. It does have intellectual property around it where we believe that we can move that cerebral spinal fluid continuously and not have to wait for you to sleep, that we can potentiate it not 4, 5, or 6 millimeters, but 200 or 300, maybe even 500 millimeters in moments, not over 8 hours.
Really? So it'd make sleep more efficient.
Maybe we don't need to sleep.
And you wouldn't have to sleep.
I'm
Do you,
just joking.
do you see that in nature? I mean, out of curiosity?
What a great question. I knew you were brilliant. I guess what I have to do tonight. Now I have to go back to nature. Thanks a lot, Leanne. I'll be up for the next 3 nights finding out if there is a creature that I can find that doesn't need to sleep. But at the end of the day, it's felt, this glymphatic system, and if they can find the key to it, that this would enable the brain to heal itself. This would have implications in Alzheimer's and other types of dementias and even traumatic brain injury. Remember, the brain and the spine are part of the central nervous system, and they don't tend to repair themselves. You can cut your finger clean off, and you can reattach it, and the nerves regrow, and you get the sensation.
Wow.
Really the central nervous system. It's not really capable. It's very plastic, meaning that if there's a stroke or a damage to one area, your brain will grow pathways around that injury. That's called plasticity. So that's wonderful. But if it's been a year since your injury, odds are a lot of that's not coming back. And so if this glymphatic system can be potentiated, I think that there's a very high likelihood that we could reach out to people that were otherwise thought impossible to help.
Interesting. Wow. So with so many potential applications, how do you decide which problem to tackle first?
That is unfortunately monetary. If you, in fact, are somebody that's intrigued and interested in inventing, first of all, I feel very sorry for you. It is a curse and a blessing at the same time. I will sometimes wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and go right to my computer and start typing. I mean, just wake up and ideas will come to me.
Yeah.
This situation, however, you have to choose the lowest hanging fruit, the one that you have that can be easily brought to market, that has reasonable margins and profit structures so that the money can be put back into the development. So all of those things takes money. And so that's probably why we ended up having to move SIDS away, and that sleep apnea became the first one that we're going after. Right thereafter, we're expecting to do an altitude illness application to the FDA. And then we're also moving right ahead with CPR for the brain and reversing brain injury. We have the military is extremely excited about this aspect. I did just pass on to Leeanne.
I was going to ask you about that. I know. I hear you just won an award, or you're moving up in a competition. Tell me
We're
about
a
that.
finalist anyway.
You're a finalist, yes.
One of the larger contests in the military is called the X-Tech 9 Search, or Search 9 project. And they reached out to over, I think, 1,000 different companies and technologies. And we submitted white papers way back in May, and we've had multiple interactions with them, and it culminated in a big pitch deck competition that occurred about 2 weeks ago. And so at that time, I got to actually, first of all, we were brought down to the top 55 people in order to be allowed to give this pitch. And after the pitch, they give a $25,000 reward to us, and then put us in a group of just 24 to go. And there are 12 different areas. Ours is called wearables. And so there are 2 companies or 2 technologies in each category. So now we're a 50-50 chance of beating out that other one wearable company. And that's a $250,000 SIBR prize. So as much as I love the money part, it's the recognition.
Right.
Wow, it's
Right.
already heard it. We've
Yeah.
already had all these phone calls from people because we were listed as a finalist on the X-Tech competition. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
really,
invaluable. Yeah, that's
and I'm still up in the clouds. I'm very, very tickled about this one.
yeah. Well, congratulations and good luck moving forward. Very, very exciting.
Yeah, I
Now,
think having not only a use case and an end, we'll call it customer, being the military involved, it also brings to bear money raises and capabilities. So for your audience, it's very into the entrepreneurial world. If you're a founder, get used to it. You're always out there with your hand out, sniffing around, finding the funding to go to the next stage. So it all sadly does weigh into balance. Is this going to help in our recognition, or is this going to help in others coming and hearing our cause and wanting to help?
right. And I've heard that from others as well, many others in the innovation space, especially when it comes to biotech. It's just needing that funding to move on for the clinical trials, for that. It's all super expensive. And so, yeah.
Human testing, especially. And the FDA, as I said, doesn't usually take the path less traveled and the inexpensive path. They come up with a more detailed path. I'm not knocking them. It's what they've always done. And at least they're not an adversarial situation. In the past, that was very adversarial. Having taken multiple products through the FDA, I'm pleased to tell you that they are trying to help you find a way through. But they're still bureaucrats, and it's much easier to say no than it is to say yes. And
Right.
that's the problem that we find ourselves in now.
Yeah. You've worked with the military, the NFL, and global research institutions. What would you say has been your biggest lesson in bringing innovation from the lab to the real world?
Failing fast. I'm not trying to plug my book, but I have a book out, and I would say a third of that book is helping people understand you not only are going to fail when you go down this inventive pathway, you need to embrace it. That's fine. You learn more from failures than you ever do in successes. The problem is, and the thing that you can't step in, is not failing fast. You need to fail as quickly as you can. If there's something wrong with your idea and concept, and somebody discovers that, well, you don't sit on their doorstep and throw tomatoes at them. You bring them dinner and thank them because you've just been saved 6-8 months of
Right.
misery and finding it out after you put $400,000 down a tube that just is gone. So failing fast and feeling comfortable that you're okay with people identifying issues, problems, and then of course getting your ideas out, and this wonderful opportunity to talk to Dr. Aguilar makes it very, very nice, because who knows, someone will come out of the woodwork and say, I think I know why this isn't going to work, Dave, and boy, I'll pick up that phone.
Right. Yeah. No, that is invaluable wisdom, I
Yeah.
think, right now. And
Yeah.
it's a mindset shift too, because I think it can hit the ego sometimes, when something that you're, especially if you're attached to and if you've been working on for a very long time, doesn't pan out. People, struggle with accepting that, but failing fast, like you said, just embrace it, move on. It'll save you time, money, stress, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and we call it inventor's bias. And, I got 47 patents. I've got a lot of bias about anybody that says, well, that can't be. And well, the first thing I'm going to tell you is, well, at least the patent office says it's novel. That doesn't mean it works, right? But
right.
we're to the point that we have provided enough information to show the patent office that we were able to go over in the corner and literally poop out something that no one's ever thought of. That's a drug. Let me tell you, that's what I love to do, is to find areas that mankind has seemingly just given up on. And believe it or not, going back to nature is what's got a lot of answers for us.
Yeah, like the TBI, your device. Many inventors struggle with skepticism or resistance to new ideas. How have you navigated doubt while pushing forward on technologies some thought impossible?
Data is king. You're going to hear a lot of statements out of Dr. Dave's mouth that in the inventor founder world, we live and breathe. So you can sit there and say that I'm wrong. And you can even say that maybe my investigators were biased. Well, I got the best institutions in the world. And I hope I'm allowed to say this, but I mean, my research teams have been from Cincinnati Children's, that's #1 presently in the research, Harvard, Mayo Clinic, West Virginia University, University of Chicago, University of Toronto. Come on. If it's not these institutions, please show me where I should have gone. And then in each of our studies, we have 28 publications with these organizations. So this was not, it may have been conceived in my garage. It was after that, we moved to some of the best scientists in the world. And oftentimes on these publications, we'll have 15 different authors, right?
Yeah, wow.
So once again, you can't just say that I'm biased and I'm somehow changing it. I don't touch, when I'm an author, I don't touch the data. I don't collect any of the subjects that created the data for us. I just help them understand, because it came out of the strange recesses of my brain, that I get to publish the discussion section, right? And that's usually my couple of paragraphs in the article that let people understand, well, what were you thinking? I mean, why would you put a cinch around somebody's neck? Are you mad?
Right.
Read the article. It'll
Right.
explain why nature does it and why we mimicked it. So I hope that answered your question.
Looking ahead, what's your ultimate vision for biomimetic medicine? If everything works as you hope, how could society be different from 10 years from now?
Boy, there are many things that I would like to do on large scales. I am one of these strange brains. I just sit there and ask why people don't ask why. At the end of the book, here's a teaser for you. It really bothered me to see all the birds line up on the electrical wires and they're getting ready to migrate. Well, what are the birds doing up there? They're out in the open. Hawks and whatever, they can be eaten out there, right? Why would they go up there on those wires? It doesn't
Right.
make sense. And what about all summer? You don't see one. You just see them during the migratory pathways.
Oh, I've always wondered that.
Oh, I think I have. Yeah.
So what's your book?
I'll send you a book. So it's called When Heads Come Together.
Okay.
And it talks about using nature to find the answers and how nature solved the traumatic brain injury scourge. So it does talk about TBI, talks about some of the devices, but we also go into some really fun stuff too. We pretty sure we figured out why bats hang upside down.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever hung upside down? It's a horrible
It is,
experience.
yeah, blood rushes to your brain, and yeah, it doesn't feel very good.
Nasty, right? So
Yeah.
why would millions of bats go into bat caves in the first place? We figured that out. And then why would they hang from the surface of the why? That just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Totally makes sense. And we go into that in the book. It has to do with all the noise that is created by these bats. So they screech at 140 decibels of sound. So if you can imagine being in this spherical structure that ricochets the sound right back at you, and there's 2 million bats doing that, why are they not deaf? And let's not forget, bats locate their food at night by echolocation.
Mm-hmm.
They dang well better have good ear. Well, how do they protect themselves? That physiology we think we've fleshed out. And once again, it sounds crazy. And when I go down one of these paths, people just roll their eyes back thinking, this guy's crazy, right? I mean, why would you care? And of course, I'm like, why wouldn't you care? This
Right.
may well solve some problems. So there's a lot of people that lost lawsuits for claiming the earplugs actually protect your inner ear. You can't do that. Earplugs decrease the amount of decibels that go down the ear canal, but the entire collector of sound is your entire head. And
Interesting.
doesn't do anything for that.
Right.
So those are the things that we suddenly realize, well, oh my God, I think this should block damage. And then we end up spending hundreds of thousands of dollars proving that we block that damage.
Mm-hmm.
So in essence, each time I come up with one of these, I'm screwed.
Ah,
You asked me what other animals are going to do this. I'm going to be
I know. No,
animals.
I love the way you think though, but that's so true. Just looking at animals and that the way they solve problems differently. I mean, in their physiology, how can we apply that, use that to mimic and solve our own big problems that we haven't? And I think you're right. There are probably a lot of solutions out there that are just right there in
Right.
front of our own eyes, and we just haven't asked the right questions.
Well,
Yeah.
it gets back to the failing part.
Yeah.
Natural selection, by definition, for millions of years, has hundreds of millions of failures, and they die off before they can pass their genes forward. That is the definition of natural selection. So if we see that an animal that maybe its lifespan is measured in 3 or 5 years instead of 80 years, right? Well, they're going to have a lot of turnover over all these years. And so they're going to be able to evolve much more quickly than we are. So
Hmm.
looking at them, you can usually see an extension of what we might be able to evolve out of or towards.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Especially with shorter lifespans, they can, evolve a lot more quickly because they
Correct.
have a lot more generations in there. And yeah, cool. Well, Dr. Dave, this has been an inspiring conversation.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, for listeners who want to follow your work and stay updated on your breakthroughs, what's the best way for them to connect with you or follow along?
So we have 2 web pages. One is my personal web page, which is davidsmithmd.com. You'll find things in there about the book. You'll find things about all of our podcasts that we've done, web pages, articles. We've been interviewed for the Super Bowl, things of that nature pop up on that web page. And then we have a newer page, which is DeltaChase.com. And DeltaChase is the one that is now commercializing the technology surrounding this small masking device called the Sage Rebreather. So that would be the site. We're not selling anything. You know what I mean? We're selling information and knowledge. We'll soon be developing and releasing to the world the Sage Rebreather. But again, it'll be a stepwise approach. We expect in 2 years the sleep apnea, 2.5 to 3 years altitude illness, and 3 to 4 years for the CPR for the brain. We also do have a money raise out there. I can't really talk about it, but we're not soliciting funds on this particular web podcast. But all of these things are there to try to help push this forward and get the research paid for.
Yeah. Well, yeah, good luck. I'm super excited to watch your progress and see everything come to market and watch these frustrations that we're experiencing in the, with sleep apnea and all the other conditions you've mentioned disappear.
We hope to. That's a major goal. I just got to tell you, my son was the very first high school student to wear the Q-Collar out there during matches and games. I believe in this, and the comfort that I had as I saw some massively bigger guy plow into my son, but with the Q-Collar, he just didn't even miss a beat. He doesn't have that flitter of time where you get your bell rung.
Right.
That just doesn't happen.
Yeah, huge implications in so many areas.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's fun.
I just lead a very blessed life.
Yeah, no, thank you again. I'm super inspired. And for everyone tuning in, make sure to follow Industry Ignited and subscribe so you don't miss upcoming episodes. And so for all of you who are tuning in, until next time, stay bold, stay curious, and keep igniting industry.
Thank you.